Don't test me because I'm fired up today. This is Corey, and this is the O The Anthem Podcast.
Nothing like flubbing it right off the gate.
Use take two.
Professionals. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Rob. Welcome to episode 334 of the O The Anthem Podcast, coming to you from the hashtag OTA LA Studios, high above the 110 freeway in downtown Los Angeles, California. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, and Rob, I don't want to waste a single minute here because we got to get right into it.
All right, let's jump in.
Yeah. Starting in Kenosha, we touched on it a little bit last week because what we had when we recorded last week was Jacob Blake had been shot. Mm-hmm. And 7 times.
7 times, yes.
Not just the once. And we talked about it and said, this seems like it's going to be a story. And then it turned out that it was. Mostly because Kyle, what is it, Rittenhouse, I'm sorry. I got confused by the weapon, I think. Kyle Rittenhouse.
Why would you get confused between him and a weapon, Corey?
Basically because he's just the avatar for the weapon to come to life, I feel like. People who are like, people don't kill, or guns don't kill people, people kill people.
Yeah.
But, you know, the person who uses the gun is Kyle Rittenhouse. So there we go.
Indeed.
This happened after we finished recording. I think it happened Tuesday night, if I remember correctly. And I am just beyond flabbergasted by this moment that we live in at this time where on one day with the same police department, we could have a black man shot 7 times in the back in front of his children. We can have 24 hours of, well, he had a knife in the car, or he should have listened to people saying stop, or blah, 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 to literally the next day, the same police department, not even in civilian clothes at this point, in their tactical outfits, taking to the streets, seeing a 17-year-old with an illegal gun, illegal by the stat that he is not allowed to have it at 17 years old, open carry in Wisconsin, walking towards that same police department with his hands in the air, and people shouting, he just shot people, and the police saying, get out of the way, and then him being able to get back in his mom's minivan, drive across the state line to Illinois, and sleep in his own bed for the night.
Yep. And now fight extradition back to Wisconsin.
Jacob Blake may not walk again. And we're talking about this kid who goes home and sleeps in his own goddamn bed. I am so fucking sick and tired of anybody who... Usually I don't want to get into these types of specific things because Fox News is just a device to help inflame the rage.
Is there to inflame you?
Inflame the rage of the far right and the people who disagree with the far right at the same time. Mm-hmm. But Tucker Carlson going on his show and saying that the lack of the lack of control over protesters is why everyday American citizens feel like they need to go into towns with guns to protect property is beyond the pale of reasonable arguments to be made at this exact time. I think back to times where there was some situation, I can't remember the exact details, but it was they did a version of it on West Wing where a hero cop was going to be mentioned at the State of the Union, and then they did a little research on him, and they found out that like 15 years earlier, in like an armed robbery, he had shot somebody.
Yeah.
And that there was an internal affairs investigation, but it didn't go anywhere. And then they talked to him afterwards, and they're like, we can't have you as a part of the speech tonight because people are going to find out about this. Yeah. And it's going to look bad that we have you up there. And he's just like, no, I'm a good cop. That was a misunderstanding. I was cleared of that. And it's just like, we can't take the risk. We can't do it. And it was based off of some real cop, I think, that in D.C. that was going to be a part of the State of the Union and got like eliminated at the last minute for such a reason. Meanwhile, at the real Republican National Convention this week, we had the 2 wingbats from St. Louis who stood outside of their houses with machine guns, like waiting for somebody to take foot on their property so that they could castle law them into the next generation. Like
machine guns. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what they're. Take this from me. I don't know what fucking guns are. Like literally everything is a machine gun to me. A little pistol, like a PP7, and I'm just like, oh, look at that machine gun.
Hey, it's a machine gun.
But yeah, this is a whole new world of unbelievable nonsense that we have found ourselves in at this moment.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to get deep in the weeds.
Yeah,
but I'm going to get deep in the weeds. Here we go. So let's just cut off some of these arguments that people make already. So Wisconsin Criminal Code 939.48 Section 2A says that you cannot use a self-defense if you are the aggravator and the provoker in a situation.
Yes.
Meaning that if you go out looking for trouble and you find trouble, you cannot then use a firearm and say, oh, it was self-defense, unless you have made it abundantly clear that you no longer want trouble. And the case that is used to support that is one where a guy went to start a fight, realized he was outgunned, put his gun down and ran away. And then when everyone started to chase him, pulled out a second gun and shot a man. And then basically was like, so by putting the gun down and running, he made it clear, I now no longer want any trouble with you. When they continued pursuit, they then became the aggressors. Yeah. And he was okay to pull out his second gun and shoot someone. So
I would like to remind everybody, the first police shooting that happened after Freddie Gray, I mean, Freddie Gray wasn't a police shooting, but the first shooting that happened of a citizen after Freddie Gray by the police was Keith Davis Jr., who got shot 41 times by the police.
That seems like a lot of times.
It does seem like a lot of times, because in any objective standard of how many times would you like to be shot at, I imagine 41 is higher than the number that you have pictured in your mind.
Well, let me ask you, is 41 higher than 0?
It is. It is in fact higher
then
than 0.
It's that new math. I can never tell. So
he was shot 41 times. He is still in jail at this moment because the one charge they were able to get on him
in the first trial.
In the first trial.
Because he's had 5 now, so let's be clear.
Was possession of a firearm. In so much as they found a gun near his body. Mind you, one that did not have prints.
Nope.
One that did not appear to have fired.
Not the same caliber as the one used in the crime they were chasing him for, supposedly.
There were a lot of claims that there was a hail of gunfire coming back at the police officers, but it wasn't this gun, and it was no other gun that was found.
Yeah.
And this one didn't have any fingerprints. This one didn't have any use of... there was no gunfire residue on Keith Davis Jr.'s hand.
It was in the garage where his bloody body was found.
Because he had a previous charge and he was not allowed to be in possession of a gun, but a gun was found next to his body, he was guilty immediately of that charge.
Be very clear here. Found next to his body in so much as they found him cowering behind a fridge.
Yeah.
And the gun was on top of the fridge.
Yeah.
Which is some sort of connection, I suppose.
But I mean, like, as we learned in the Gun Trace Task Force trial, never in the world has a police officer planted evidence on somebody, specifically a gun or anything, in a situation where maybe you have fired 41 shots on some unsuspecting person.
Yeah. So then,
but he still rots in a jail cell right now with a bullet lodged in his face that is going to kill him at some point.
And the state is trying real hard to let it kill him. Like they're fighting medical treatment to make him die.
And the fact that we can't, as a people, understand that we have been given the most perfect, and perfect I mean an imperfect version of this, but it's the perfect metaphor for what so many people have been saying, that the differences between how police operate between black citizens and white citizens is no longer in dispute. We have before, people would say, oh, this is one solitary incident. It's not by the same police department. It's not the same blah, blah, blah.
Can't compare.
We have all the same factors that are going on here. And not only that, Jacob Blake, by the fact that, the protests hadn't started breaking out yet because he hadn't been shot, these cops were wearing everyday normal police uniforms, as opposed to when Kyle was out there. It was the full-fledged, the assault version of the police department.
Well, and ironically enough, the cop who shot Jacob Blake had not been put on suspension yet. So he was actually still there. All of the factors are there. Like, it's literally, and I don't want to understate what you said at the beginning. This is a police department who came out in 2 different situations. Well, two of the same situations, and said 2 different responses are exactly what cops should do.
Yeah.
And the only difference is the suspect is a different race. So what you're telling me then is, when we have black people, this is the appropriate response. And when we have white people, this is the appropriate response.
I mean, we from time to time, when trying to describe ridiculous scenarios, often bring up if this was a movie.
Yes.
They would tell you that this story is too ridiculous to put out there. Nobody would buy it.
And I think that's what we talked about that first night.
And I don't know what else would need to be in this set of circumstances to get them to arrest Kyle right there at the moment that they saw him with his hands up. He had a gun. right?
Yes. In his hands, by the way, as the first cop approached. And the cop said,
And then
drop it,
yeah.
and he let it go. But because it was on a sling, it just slung down within arm's reach of him. By the way, and if he was black, they would have shot him because when he dropped it, it didn't hit the ground.
There are people on the sidewalk they're saying, he shot somebody.
That's
this
the
person who's walking towards you. You don't even stop him and say, hey, what went on? Because I bet you if one police officer said, hey, what's going on with they said you shot somebody, I bet he would immediately be like, yes, officer, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Like, it would be the second he had the opportunity to do so, he would give it all up. But he's going home.
Well, I do feel bad for Kyle because now he's not going to get his Burger King stop with the water on the way to the police station.
Here, of all the sometimes we quabble with the mainstream media. We say that they're not quite doing the right job, and I get it. It's hard, especially if you work at a place like CNN where that Sandman kid from staring down the Native American elder. You remember that whole thing? He sued and got a huge payout because a lot of people went on the air and were just like, this fucking kid yelling racist things at the...
You mean legitimate news agencies that are afraid of not putting out accurate news?
Yes. So I understand why you might be a little bit gun shy. Yeah. But I had the whole story on Twitter almost in real time as it was happening. I saw the video of him getting water from the cops and them thanking them for doing the good job. I had the Facebook group and the amplification of it by, and I forgot to look it up, whether it's Breitbart or InfoWars, one of the two of them I know was the one who like amplified this whole message. We had all of that the night of. But if you're watching live on CNN at the time, you're getting, there's a lot of protesting going on in Wisconsin. We don't know we don't know specifically what's happening. It wasn't hard to miss this kid. He was wearing a very distinguishable outfit.
Yeah, like a greenish color T-shirt, backwards hat, face covering,
like
gloves.
A white backwards hat with the blue latex gloves.
Yeah,
and the problem is that I understand that you want to make sure you got the story right, but there is a time and place where you can put footage of cops giving people, like armed militia with guns wrapped around them, water, and say, this looks an awful lot like that kid. We're looking for the true A-OK that this is him. But if it isn't him, this is still a video of cops saying, hey, we really appreciate you guys coming out here and defending property.
Yeah.
Because it started with a Facebook group that just all of a sudden developed that was saying that they needed people to show up with guns to defend property in Kenosha. And people did it. And now, I think they said 80% of the arrests of people for being out and about in Kenosha were people who were not anywhere near Kenosha.
Yeah.
Like not within the immediate surroundings of Kenosha. And I mean, it's a 30-minute drive from Kenosha to where Kyle lived. So, I mean, I guess you could make an argument that he was somewhat local, but I don't define across state lines as local enough for me to...
It's a Eastern Shore local, not so much what you might be used to. But
I mean, it's Baltimore to D.C. or something like that. So
I would say that for a 17-year-old kid, if you need your mom to take you someplace, you're not local. That's can we say that that's the rule basically? But obviously, this is a developing thing. Kyle Rittenhouse has been identified. He is now fighting extradition from
Illinois.
Illinois back into Wisconsin. And I have a fear that the streets of Kenosha are going to quickly turn into the streets of Portland. Because if you haven't been paying attention, and I really hope that you guys have, but again, Corey and I get a lot of news from Twitter, and I keep saying, you should just get your news from Twitter because Unicorn Riot is recording live and you see it.
Here's the thing about Twitter. I'm not saying that it's the news source that you should go to for everything.
Oh, no.
Because it's fast and furious and you don't know what is and what isn't true. But what you are able to develop pretty quickly is certain things that rise to the top. So there can be a breaking story that Twitter has completely wrong because they don't have the insight to accurately tell the story. But at least you are getting enough information so that you can judge whether or not... I like it more in the sense that Twitter is like calling balls and strikes. Like, I see something come in and I'm just like, that looks good. That looks bad. Like, and then you can start developing how the story is being told through the media, through how it's being developed on Twitter.
It's more like actually being there than waiting and having someone tell you what it was like to be there. Because you get to see stuff happen live.
I would argue that it's more like something just happened and you ran up and you're asking a bunch of people what just happened.
Who were there. Yeah, people who were actually there.
Right. And sometimes you get somebody who said like, oh, there were 15 explosions. And then you find out later it was only like 2 explosions. But then you're just like, well, he had the explosions part right. I don't necessarily have to take every single thing that he says as the word of God. But what is great is video, because there's almost no arguing video. And They had Kyle all the way from I'm sorry to cut back.
No, go ahead.
But they had Kyle all the way from the gas station all the way to the cops. And that was a 8-10 minute long video of him shooting 2 people, like all within a continuous cut.
And not to correct you there, but 3 people. He shot the first one, and that's what made people turn on him. And then he's now claiming self-defense because they attacked him, ignoring the fact that he shot somebody, which is what made people attack him. So,
So like part of like the judging of Twitter thing is like I saw a lot of people tweeting and retweeting messages of like, well, he was killing a pedophile. And I'm just like, okay, we all hate pedophiles.
Yes.
We all wish they would die.
That's an easy way to turn us on your side.
That's an easy way to get us on your side. Let me just quickly tell you that the way that we traditionally have decided to deal with pedophiles is through the court of law.
Yeah.
You arrest somebody. You say, we are charging you with pedophilia, child pornography, blah, 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 whatever it may be. And then we give evidence, and you have a chance to defend yourself. And then if a jury of your peers decides that you were guilty, then you go to jail when the judge sentences you. Yep. That's basically how we decide right and wrong in the situation.
Funny thing, Kyle couldn't be on that jury because he's not 18.
Just real quick, from the legal perspective here, and then we can get back to Portland real quick. Just to finish up here. So if you are his defense attorney, just, obviously this will take a little bit of gymnastics on your part, but if you are his defense attorney and you're arguing self-defense, what are you claim? Like, how do you counteract he drove across state lines, he had a gun he wasn't allowed to have? Like, where do you try and separate these two things?
So equal protection says that the laws of a state apply to everyone in that state, whether or not they're a citizen of that state. So castle law, self-defense, no retreat, these things all apply to him, despite the fact that he may have brought a gun across state lines. And actually, it looks like he didn't cross state lines with a gun, that someone who was there gave him a gun. So it was legally registered in Wisconsin. It wasn't his. Also, being 17, he should not have been open carrying in the state because that's one of the laws. But I think that what your argument there is that you have to ignore if he had been in Illinois, he would have been within his rights as a 17-year-old to
open carry.
Yeah. So I think that you go with listen, you have a particular law here that doesn't apply to him at home. So ignoring the fact that he may have broken that law, which is a victimless crime, and I have another opinion about victimless crimes, but let's just say victimless crime, then everything after that is all arguments about the video doesn't show everything. That the first shooting was self-defense. And it's self-defense because we're going to put on evidence that even the first guy who was shot came at him. Yeah. And then he was trying to flee or trying to retreat, but the person wouldn't let him retreat, so he fired, and then that brought the entire crowd on him, which he then had to fire several times in order to escape.
I mean, to be fair to him, in a whether or not I would find him guilty if I was on a jury, I think the second shooting where he's on the ground and he's shooting up at the skateboarder could be classified as self-defense in that specific situation because it was somebody with a weapon that was coming at him, and therefore maybe he gets off on that one. Maybe that one is more of a self-defense argument.
But
the first one, depending on evidence, will depend on whether or not both those charges of murder come through.
If I'm the prosecutor, though, I argue that the gentleman with the skateboard, who was actually the one who died, one of the two who died, that he was enacting 939.48 3 of the criminal code that says you are allowed to use lesser or equal force in order to come to the defense of a third person in self-defense. So although you may not yourself have been threatened, if someone else is threatened, you can come to their aid and essentially take on the mantle of their self-defense and use a weapon, especially if that weapon is lesser or equal to the
So,
force
like,
being
if
used
I
against
saw a criminal rob an old lady and take her purse,
Yes.
I can attack this guy on her
in her
defense.
Yes.
And
if
take
that guy
the purse
shoots,
back.
if that guy shoots me, he can't say, well, that guy was attacking me. I didn't have anything to do with him.
Yeah.
No, he took on the mantle of defense from the victim, and then you shot him in the continuance of your crime. That's what the state will argue.
Yeah.
The guy's coming at you with a skateboard because you shot someone already.
Well,
but they're looking for the continuation of self-defense from before the first shooting through the end.
I imagine the state's defense, though, is going to be largely on the idea that he is acting much like somebody who just learned Krav Maga and wants to try out his moves on somebody who picks a fight with him.
Yeah.
And will say things that will push the line a little bit at the bar just to get somebody rowdy and upset at him.
Yep.
And as soon as that first punch comes, then it's like, oh, it's self-defense at this point, and I can beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, and there's something called the fighting words doctrine that says that if I use words that I know will incite you to violence, it doesn't excuse the violence, but I don't then get to enact stand your ground or self-defense because I've done or said something that I know or should have known will bring the violence that I'm looking for.
It's me showing up in Pittsburgh with the Ravens gear, being a total asshole, and then picking fights with people.
I think up until the point you pick the fights, you're fine. But as soon as you're just,
saying horrible things about Ben Roethlisberger, then I'm on my own.
But that would only apply to Ben Roethlisberger.
Oh.
Because the fans wouldn't be able to attack you for
They're
that
not taking up his defense.
No, it's not fighting words. But it's ironic that we kind of talk about that at the end because that's a little bit what's happening in Portland.
Yes.
And the continuing saga. I don't know if you guys have been following. You probably haven't. But Portland's still happening. Just because the feds left didn't mean anything stopped. Tonight will be the 96th consecutive night of violence, likely, in Portland.
Yeah.
They have...
Well, of protesting and to varying degrees violent. I am a little bit talking about mainstream media and the other side here. There's an awful lot of footage that is being shown on Fox News from like a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
That is being like violence again in the streets in Portland, which I find a little bit in poor taste.
Now, and if you guys see this picture that is beside me in the YouTube video, these are not cops. These are protesters who have now gotten shields and battering rams and gas masks and body armor and are essentially defending themselves from the police. They're getting organized. It's turning into Ukraine like 2012. Winter on Fire. I don't know if you ever saw that documentary, but it's essentially Winter on Fire now. Mm-hmm. And it's important because again, the lead into this was there is a chance that Kenosha can turn into this, that no matter what the exacerbating circumstances are, the mayor in Portland was relatively conciliatory, but the police chief just basically was like, no, we give no ground. And thinking they went into it with a mentality of war, thinking we're going to break the populace, and this ain't the city to try that in.
Yeah.
And they were already at this point of struggle between the two parties when a bunch of Trumpers decided yesterday to roll through town with paintball guns that had pepper bullets in them and pepper spray and tear gas, and essentially find a street where there were protesters on it and roll down the middle of that street, spraying people on the sides of the street with gas and with pepper spray. And you made an interesting point in our pre-show discussion, which I think is worth repeating here, and that's the end result of this is that, let me take an educated guess. Somebody in that little Trump train had an actual firearm with them. Mm. The next time they try to roll through town with pepper spray and tear gas, someone from the crowd is also going to have pepper spray and tear gas and hit the convoy with it. Now, having escalated to the same use of force, the Trumpers are likely to escalate that force higher and fire on them with a firearm. Now, everyone will run and they'll all hide because nobody wants to get shot. But the next time that the Trumpers come through, they'll be ready with guns. And Then you get to the point of, is it self-defense when I see a guy with 2 big Trump flags in the back of his truck, and the first time he came through, he pepper sprayed me. The second time, I pepper sprayed him back, and he shot at me. That I just shoot at the truck when I see it.
Yeah.
And is it reasonable?
Or that, the problem was that, there were they were having a caravan down the highway towards downtown Portland. And apparently some protesters were trying to take out their tires and stuff like that as they were rolling through. But
take out their
oh, I know. I get what you're saying. But I'm saying
they put up barricades.
Yeah. But I mean it's I think that this type of us against them is not going to get us to the place that we need to be to find lasting peace in this situation. It's Trump. Whether or not you will, it can be pretty clear that his words have inspired people to take awful actions.
Yes.
And
by the way, when you're flying a big Trump flag out the back of your truck, it's hard for the president to say, "Listen, I don't know where they're getting these ideas."
Yeah. It's a match talking to a room full of gas cans. It's just a moment away from.
But there are 3 situations where that is exact the case.
Yes.
Franco in Spain, Mussolini in Italy, and Hitler in Germany, where crowds of people would go incite violence all over the place, and the leader would say, "Listen, those aren't our people.
Yeah.
I have no idea why. Yes, they're chanting my name, but that's because they like me, but they're not my people. I can't control them.
I can't help it if you like me." I mean,
what do you want me to do? Which furthers the point I've made previously that fascism is here. This is exactly what fascism is. Somebody said, I saw Facebook, somebody posted, I can't wait for this election to be over so we can just, so we can stop seeing everything on social media about all the election and the splits and divides. And I said, the civil war that's going to come after the election is going to really upset you if you're upset about the election talk. Because Portland, Kenosha, before that, Minneapolis and Kenosha are, as American, if you want to think of it that way, as you can, center of the country.
Yeah.
Portland, I'll give you. It's like Nazis and hipsters side by side.
Portland's a weird combination.
Very
of
weird
very
town.
Left and very right.
But Kenosha, Wisconsin is on the verge of a civil war. They're sending in the National Guard.
Kenosha, Wisconsin is a small town.
Yeah.
It's not this big place that Portland at least is a city of several 100,000 people.
Yeah.
Kenosha is, 50,000 maybe. It's Towson or another small town outside of near small
a big
to medium.
city.
Yeah. It's not. I'm just where I know that this is going next, and I just feel it in my bones, is that the response to, say, Trump loses the election, and peacefully goes away, just says, you got me. Yeah. I'm going back to Mar-a-Lago, and leaves, and Joe Biden becomes president. Right. Number one, Joe Biden is not going to be the great white savior who is going to defund the police and do all this stuff, no matter how much Trump talks about it, because Joe Biden has made it very clear he's not interested in defunding the police or doing anything like that. He's interested in generalized equality, doing the small things, but he's not
doing the bare minimum.
He's not prepared. He's not prepared to say that police shouldn't be militarized or be 85% of a city's budget or anything like that. He's just not at that point.
Again,
nor will he ever.
Picked as a VP.
Nor will he ever. So, if Joe becomes president, then Fox News is going to start doing all the leftist radical mob like they've continued to be doing throughout this whole thing. This is Joe Biden's America, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, people on the left are going to be antagonized by something else that will divide them.
Yep.
And I think people keep thinking about Joe Biden as this down the middle choice that will unite the country and we'll all be together at the end of this. But it doesn't change the fact that if you're a middle candidate, you're speaking to the middle left, and to the middle right. The far left and the far right want nothing to do with the people in the middle right now. There are way too many. It used to be that you would say that, 20% are people who are
the fringe.
Clear Democrats.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Or far left Democrats, and maybe 20% on the other end are far right Republicans, and then everybody else is some sort of amalgam of different political ideologies.
Yeah.
And I really do feel like the far extents are now taking over the fact that we can't have a civilized conversation about this because neither side wants to negotiate.
Well, I said again, somebody on Facebook, the campaign and the podcast, the new podcasts are all just making me dive into Facebook, and I don't like it at all. But I said somebody on Facebook, basically something like that. Like, do you know what President Joe Biden most makes me think of? Abraham Lincoln. Somebody who came in saying, I'm not going to upset the status quo here. I'm just trying to keep things moving forward. Mm-hmm. And yes, I'm this party, but I see your point of view. I just want to keep us all going down the middle. Lincoln said, I've been an abolitionist before. I want to protect the rights of states without slavery to be able to not have slaves. But I'll also respect your right to continue having slavery. But the people on the fringe in the South said, no, if we elect him, that's taking a stab at everything we stand for.
Yeah.
And the fringe now, based on what we saw at the RNC, is saying the same thing. If you elect him, you are electing a huge leftist who is going to divide this country, and we're going to have to make a stand. And it's exactly the same situation. We think of Abe Lincoln as the great emancipator, but he wasn't. He literally was like, I just trying to keep this train rolling on the tracks. I'm going to keep it exactly where we are and keep it going. He was forced, when the states left, he was forced to be like, all right, well, war, I guess. Emancipation came 3 years later. Anyway.
It's funny. We put all conversations about like political fighting in the perspective of the Civil War.
Yeah.
Because it was literally states versus states.
Yeah.
But if you really want to talk about it, the great curse of American struggle is not the Civil War as much as it is the Reconstruction that follows the Civil War.
Yeah.
Figuring out, it's more or less to some degree, it's been a 160-year project to get this thing all put back together again, and we still haven't done it. And,
Well, listen, I told you, I have the solution for that, Corey.
I know you
Let's
do.
all meet in Dallas. We're going to form a skirmish line all the way across and just burn everything from there to the Atlantic Ocean. I think that'll be a solution.
It's not on the rundown, but just a fun fact. The University of Alabama showed 400 positive cases of coronavirus as some students came back onto campus. That is more than the entire country of Canada had on that same day.
Nice.
So,
nice.
Just a thing. A thing.
Listen,
Roll Tide.
We've been comparing Joe Biden to Lincoln, and I just want to say that at least we have competent leadership in the White House now who would never do anything to inflame domestic tensions by, being told by senators and congressmen and governors and mayors, do not come here, and saying, no, I'm going to go there anyway.
Fuck it.
Yeah, it's here's the thing. We were also talking a little bit about manipulating the president, and this is where they got it wrong. The mayor of Kenosha, the police chief of Kenosha, senators, congressmen, the governor of Wisconsin said, Mr. President, please do not come here. The thing they should have said was, if you don't come here, I don't know. It's an emergency. We need your presence here. We need your greatness. And then we've been like, tell me how great I am. And he wouldn't have come. Like, it would just been like any other thing. But they said, don't come here. And Trump said, screw you. I'm going to Kenosha. Which will be sure to, keep things off of the Portland track.
I'm so fucking, this whole thing is just a new shocking low. So we talked about it with like the Portland mayor.
Yeah.
Or no, it was Minnesota when he showed up at some event trying to calm down the tensions post George Floyd. And he came to an event where he was talking to the protesters, and they were like booing him and get the fuck out of here unless you're going to defund the police. We don't want to hear it. And somebody threw a shoe at him or something like that, or a bottle or something.
A bottle, yeah.
But like a Coke bottle or something.
It was water. It's just a water bottle.
A water bottle.
Yeah.
And it, hit 10 feet away from him or whatever. But immediately the crowd turned and said, not here. This is not what we're doing.
We will yell at him and tell him what we think. Do not start that shit here.
The same thing happened in Portland. The mayor apparently has an apartment, and a bunch of protesters stormed the lobby and would not leave until they had redress with the mayor. These are ways to protest without being violent. If Trump were the type of person who could show up to a place like Kenosha and talk to people, like you remember when hurricanes used to hit and presidents would go to the place and like sit down on a cot next to somebody who just lost their house and like you would have this picture of George W. Bush sitting next to somebody who's lost it all.
Throw some paper towels in their face. Is that what you're talking about? That?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Show up and be like the kind and like, you know, like, I'm so sorry for everything that happened. We're doing everything we can to fix this, and, you know, be the uniter and stuff like that. There's no way Trump shows up at a place and it becomes easier to get to get to a solution, you know?
No.
And it's just it's so beyond angering. And like you said, trying to manipulate a presidency. It used to take hundreds of thousands of dollars and craft work and spies, and you used to have to split your spies amongst the 10 people who might become president so that you have the inroads on all of them. Like,
watch The Manchurian Candidate and see how difficult it is. You got to catch a guy when he's 30 that might become president.
Now all it takes is Nancy Pelosi. I swear to God, she might as well have just said wink, wink when she made this statement, going like, well, I don't know if Joe Biden is going to want to have debates with Donald Trump. Like, he just might not have a single debate at all. Like, it's just like, I saw it from 1,000 miles away. I was just like, oh, she's trying to bait Republicans in the worst way I've ever seen possible. This isn't going to work.
It worked.
Guess what happened? It worked. It worked.
Fox News blew up.
Yeah, like fucking Tommy Lahren just tweeting out like, you know, like, oh, fuck this bitch. Trump will destroy Biden in the debate. Whatever. It's like, I've never seen somebody so easily, not even just the person, but the mechanism by which they operate, so easily like dissectable.
Yeah.
And if for whatever reason we had, you know, competent leadership on the Democratic side, perhaps we could take advantage of this, but it's unbelievable. Like,
but here's the thing. If it doesn't work, I got one more piece of advice.
McConnell is literally the only one who has any sense of tactic or anything
and
anywhere.
The president
in the bunch.
doesn't listen to him, so it's not going to work the opposite way. But
he listens in as much as when McConnell says, "Hey, I don't want to be a part of this," he's just like, "You got it."
But for Democrats, I got one piece of advice for you.
Yeah.
If Pelosi doesn't work, go with AOC, because if anything's going to bring him to a debate, it's AOC saying like, well, you know, Trump, he can't really debate. So it's, you know, he doesn't want to get on stage because he'll look foolish. And then he'll get up on stage and say, like, well, you know, AOC said I couldn't get up here because I look foolish. And he'll be like, Mr. President, your zipper's down. And he's like, so I don't know why.
See, what I don't know, I know that the Democrats are trying to take this from a place of decorum and we're not going to reach their level and stuff like that. But you know what the thing that seems to irritate Trump the most is when you land a really good jab at him. Yeah. Like, notice how all of our nightmares started when Obama eviscerated him at the correspondence dinner. How that started it all, and like now he's going to be president to show us and shit like that. Like, at this point, just, you know, fucking have AOC call him bitch tits or something like that on the floor of the house and just let the show start, because he is going to unravel so fast, and there is no.
I get it. I do believe in they go low, we go high.
Yeah.
But at some point, you got to just say, I'm going to step off my high horse. I don't have to go to their level, but I'm going to step down and give them just a little jab.
But I mean, like, you go low, I go high is me and you are having a conversation where we disagree. Yeah. You say it's red, I say it's blue, right? And we're going back and forth, and we're saying, oh, no, it's definitely blue because of this reason. It's definitely red because of this reason. If somebody else comes in and says, you both are crazy, it's a potato, and we look at him, and there has to be a point where you just say, like, you're not allowed to be a part of this fucking conversation because you're not even involved in the base level of what we're doing here.
We don't do that.
We don't do that. We acknowledge the fact that this new person who came in and said potato is now part of the argument. Like, that's not that. This is before fringe views, like expounded by crazy people, was laughed at and dismissed.
Yeah.
Like, now it's leading the 8 o'clock hour on Fox.
Speaking of the problems with mainstream media, that's the other thing with CNN. They are so afraid of not seeming like they're balanced and that we have somebody in. There are some things for which there's only one opinion. And you don't need to go find Fringy McCrazy and bring him in and put him equal to Dr. Fauci and try to explain how these things are. No, there is no argument. This is the science. That's it. And Fox News still running with the fair and balanced nonsense with just no semblance of balance whatsoever.
I mean, it's like a while back we talked about Richard Spence getting punched. You remember that?
Yes.
Blazing constant rotation in Rob's head. The better days. But I mean, like the argument there is, like he doesn't deserve to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
So,
although now I'm down with it because when he says like this whole right wing thing's over, I'm like, let's listen to Richard Spence. Let's see what he has to say.
Richard Spence saying he's voting for Joe Biden is the most on brand. Like, I need to get a news story written in the history of the world. But no, the point was, when Rob and I argued about that, the argument was, is Nazism so bad, or the white supremacy so bad that you can't even bother to have the conversation? It's just immediate violence.
Yes.
And then I said that no, that doesn't need to be violence. There needs to be we are not listening to what you have to say part of this conversation.
We don't do that. We need to jump straight to the violence.
I know where you're coming from. I'm saying that the two reasoned arguments here are either we are going you can either ignore it and say we're not going to pay attention to the crazy person, or you have to fight back upon it. Those are the two choices in which to respond to somebody who does it. So while I don't agree with the violence part of it, I acknowledge that there's only two ways to do this. So,
and only one way is going to work. All right. So I guess I don't want to harp on news out of Minnesota or Wisconsin, because I don't think we've talked about Wisconsin as much since what's his name was governor of it.
Walker.
Yeah. Walker becomes governor. We forget about Wisconsin, and then cops got to go shooting people in the back, and we start talking about it again. But
don't worry. November's coming. We'll talk about Wisconsin again, I'm sure.
Like it's Game of Thrones. Like winter is coming. We must go back to Wisconsin. But again,
because at some point we could have talked about it during the Wisconsin primary, because it was one of the first ones that happened like post-COVID hitting, and it was a spectacular shit show of unlike anything we've ever seen before.
And it will be again, I'm sure.
And I'm sure that not only will that repeat itself in November, but we're going to get a whole new run of like, just the day before the election, just 90,000 people eliminated from the voter rolls in Wisconsin. Surprise.
But not that story. Instead, this time we're going to be talking about sports ball. So I guess it's not really sports ball. It's sports related.
Well, I mean,
we're talking more about the players than we are the playing the game.
Well, I mean, it's in relation to Jacob Blake here, because some truly amazing things happened just this past weekend with what was happening in response to Jacob Blake from the NBA and other sports leagues. And it mostly started with the Milwaukee Bucks, who are the home team for Jacob Blake, if you will, being the Wisconsin team.
By the way, I forgot Milwaukee was in Wisconsin until this. Sorry, I just added that part in. I forgot it was Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm like, Milwaukee, that place where the Brewers and the Bucks play. Wait, shit, that's Wisconsin? Oh my God.
I thought it was Milwaukee, Minnesota. The Bucks basically had a moment before their game against the Orlando Magic started where they were like, none of us feel like playing, because this is we came to the bubble. We thought that we would have we were given opportunities to speak out on the issues that are bothering us. They've been allowed to have Black Lives Matter is on the court. They have certain things that they could put on the back of their jerseys that denote some sort of respect to, say her name or Black Lives Matter or whatever. Certain messages have been approved. But the Bucks sort of unilaterally, without talking to the union, talking to any other players, doing anything like that, decided we're not playing tonight. And the Magic had the chance to accept a forfeit.
Get the win.
Yeah. And said, no, we're not playing either. And then that sort of sent off a bunch of different teams saying, okay, we're not playing either. We had the moment where eventually it was 250 players or whatever in a room hashing out how they wanted to handle this, which, again, don't take it from me. Having a conversation with 5 people is sometimes an impossible task. If you get 200, if you get a wedding amount of people together, that's a completely different.
I remind you, that was basically Occupy Baltimore. There's a big group of people.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, this is really easy. if you guys like the things I'm saying, just don't talk. Get the floor, cede the floor to me, and that's it. Just I'm going to continue to say the same things. If you don't agree with me, you don't have to cede the floor. But instead of us all voting, just say, I got the votes of 100 people, so I'm going to speak, and then I'm going to make the vote for 100 people. And that got me kicked out of Occupy Baltimore because I created political parties within the movement, and they didn't like that. So
I'm very happy that the Bucks were able to do this, and that it didn't set off a huge problem with the players union or the owners or anything like that. And we seem to have come to some sort of agreement, at least between the NBA players and the ownership. A lot of things regarding using arenas as voting sites and stuff like that, which is great.
And will help with social distancing on election day.
Yeah,
so.
Because much easier to social distance when you're in the Staples Center.
Yeah, rather than the elementary school that's 4 blocks down from the Staples Center.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And to be honest, that probably should have been like that the whole time. Like,
yeah, it's funny. Funny about that.
Because it's such a, like we pay so much for these arenas and stuff like that. Like, I grant that some of them are private property and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But even if you took the Rams' new stadium in Inglewood, mm-hmm. which is, I don't think is going to be a voting center, but, could be, I guess.
Listen, Rams players.
I mean, Stan Kroenke bought the arena or paid for the arena.
Yeah.
He paid billions of dollars to construct this thing out in the middle of Inglewood. But, the city of California certainly did give him some tax considerations to mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Make it a little bit easier. Like, hey, listen, you don't have to pay the taxes for the first 10 years, but then after that, we're going to start collecting. This will give you a chance to...
may have heard us talk about TIFs before. They're very popular. So
or vertical integration as opposed to horizontal integration. So, the Rams are responsible for putting the building up, but mm-hmm. the state is responsible or the city is responsible for building out amongst it.
Mm-hmm.
So railways and stuff like that. Regardless, I think that they did more by not playing than they would have if they played and then sent messages at the end of the game, because they have been... The NBA players have been all over this. The WNBA, too, which also canceled games,
mm-hmm.
and had players taking knees with T-shirts where they had 7 bullet holes in the back.
Yeah.
The WNBA don't fuck around either. They've been right at the forefront of all this, by the way. If you're looking for the most progressive league you can find.
They were doing stuff before.
Yeah,
when the NBA was like, you pull this stuff and we're going to sit you, the WNBA players were all together.
When they were giving stern warnings to LeBron James for wearing "I Can't Breathe" T-shirts during warm-ups, the WNBA was just like, bye.
Black bands on the jersey, just like, no. We all already talked about it. Who's all of you? All the players.
Literally all the players in the league. We're in a text group.
So it's
fine. We have an organization like that. We just reach out. We get it all. It's done in seconds. And, baseball, hockey, football teams canceled practices in regards to this to discuss what they wanted to do with social justice going forward. I think that it's a great moment for sports to help elevate the conversation. I worry, though, eventually that the owners are going to start negotiating in terms of wildcat strikes and stuff like that because this happened. Because the owners have to be very accepting of all this because it looks awful if you're going like, fuck these guys, they should be playing. Like, it just makes you look very out of touch if you are that person. So I think that it's great. I also feel like, maybe if there wasn't basketball for the rest of the year, that would send more of a message. But, there's limits to how much you can pull this without making substantial problems for not only you, but maybe your union or fellow players and stuff like that.
And I was going to say, I think the other thing is a responsibility of like, we want to draw awareness. That's why we do it. But also this is a source of entertainment in a world with not so much entertainment, especially for a lot of their fan base. This is what they were looking for. Yeah. NBA finals. You said the OJ chase happened during the NBA finals. And now the NBA finals are part of that story. It's like, the finals continue no matter what's really going on in the world, and the fan base really wants them. So you don't want to disappoint your fan base because the MLB learned in '94 it takes a long time to get back when you disappoint the fan base. But I think it was enough that some teams took off 2 nights, some players took off 2 nights, some took off just one night.
There was so I think what the NBA players eventually came to was like, we need to have a discussion with the owner or with the league and the ownership group to sort of get some things on paper right now before we start playing again, kind of thing.
Yeah, we're not going to say we'll go back and play and then we'll talk about it. It's like, let's go talk and then we'll start playing again.
We'll have a quick conversation. It's not going to be like you know a big huge deal, but and I mean, granted, you know the owners, you know, I'm not trying to paint them as these awful, evil, you know, bureaucrats or anything like that.
I'll pay them as that. That's fine.
They're donating $300 million, which is not no amount of money, towards charities and towards causes which would greatly affect a move towards social justice.
After that conversation?
No, prior to.
Was that before?
There was I think it was 200. They upped the ante on it, but it was like
just saw the story,
it was a substantial amount of money prior to this conversation. But you know,
but that was also to get the players to come play in the bubble as well, right? It was part of the negotiation for this season.
That might have been the case.
Yes.
I don't remember exactly like when things happened specifically there.
I feel like it was like, come play in the bubble. We're going to donate a bunch of money for social justice. And now they're like, oh, shit, now we have to donate money every time something happens.
But I mean, like
that might get the change. If we can get the oligarchical class to be like, you are costing us too much money. Every time you kill somebody, we got to donate more than $100 million.
Hit them in the pocketbook. That's the... I wasn't concerned when it was people dying, but now that I have to give out millions of dollars that I have lying around that I would never be able to spend before I die.
Yeah, I like my pile of rice. That's how it works. But I think that's it for.
Just two quick points there. Major League Baseball also did their walkouts. The Brewers started it as well, being the Wisconsin team, to remind Rob of where Milwaukee is.
Yes.
And then I liked the moment in New York with the Mets and the Marlins where they went to the field like the game was going to start. They stood for 42 seconds in honor of Jackie Robinson because they were going to celebrate Jackie Robinson Day. Yeah. The next day, put a Black Lives Matter T-shirt on home plate, and then left.
Yep.
And, you know, it's tough. I think that the teams and the leagues are finally coming around to the idea that there's no stopping players from having opinions and having like the days of shut up and dribble are gone. Like that's just not part of the conversation anymore, nor should it be.
I was going to say, I got to give it to, I am sure that there are players who do not support that message politically.
Yeah.
There are Trump voters amongst the leagues, and maybe we've switched from shut up and dribble to shut up and walk off with us. Yeah. You are a player. We are players. We are doing this. I am surprised that in that walk-off in the Marlins Mets game that not somebody didn't just stand out there for the national anthem like, no, I'm with the president on this one. Also, hard to do that when you shoot somebody in the back 7 times. But I'm just saying, you know, it's still, I wouldn't put it past. I know people on Facebook who would just be like, no, you guys you're not getting it straight.
You don't understand why Trump's so great. And then the one last thing, just getting out of here, I'd just like to say farewell to the Orioles that have been traded on this trade deadline.
Miguel Castro. That story.
Oh, yes. Miguel Castro, Michael Givens, and Tommy Malone were all traded. But, you know, so it's weird with the COVID season here. Technically, only the 60 players who are on the roster and the expanded roster are players that can be traded for.
Okay.
So there's a lot of player to be named later trades that are going on right now. So the Orioles pulled off the trade for Miguel Castro, got us Kevin Smith from the Mets, who's a like their 12th ranked prospect. So he was in the bubble. So we hear about, or he was on the expanded roster. So we could hear about him being traded. But when Michael Givens was traded, we heard about 2 players and a player to be named later.
Right.
So hypothetically, the 2 players who are coming this way from the Givens trade are 2 good high prospects because they're in the expanded roster. And the other guy is, they know who it is, but he's not in that expanded roster, so therefore cannot be a part of a trade until the season's over. Yeah.
Or whatever.
Right. Colorado's Delmarva.
Yeah.
But it's always sad with trade deadline day because sometimes you get new players who make you excited, and sometimes you're getting rid of guys that have been with you for a while. And Michael Givens and Miguel Castro have been people who've been with us for a while, and wish them the best. And as Mike Elias was saying, they'll always be Orioles to us. They always have a place they're always welcome in this town,
Most importantly, how did this affect the odds on the Orioles for the World Series win?
I would say the 2 weeks of not winning that much did more to the odds of the Orioles than anything that. I'm glad I didn't make that trip to Vegas.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's $100. It's the risk.
Nothing.
It's
nothing.
No, it's just it's like, hey, I could walk away with $1 million.
I mean, technically the odds have probably gotten better. So
true, but the likelihood has gotten worse.
Not better. Likelihood is not better. That's for sure.
But that's sports ball. And I think, speaking of things that have not gotten better, the RNC. I think we were at going into night 1 of the RNC when we were here last week, and we said, much of this stuff was expected, but it didn't seem that bad, and maybe they're going to keep it calm. And then they absolutely did not. The picture you can see next to me here is Kimberly Guilfoyle, who I learned this week was like a quiet, subdued girlfriend for Gavin Newsom.
Yeah.
And just like the perfect little Democrat wife. And then they break up. Not his wife, but, I want to be like Jackie. I'm just going to be the quiet. And then they break up, and then she starts dating Don Jr. And turns into this. And, there's a lot of stories going around. I think we're going to mention Charlotte Kirk in a little bit. But I see a little bit of that in this, where it's just like, all right, what kind of man am I dating here? All right. I need to be brassy. I need to be like... look like I'm drunk and did an 8-ball right before I go on stage. Great.
I was amazed by the characters that showed up at the RNC. I mean, most of them were Trump family or people who worked in the administration.
Yeah. Or crazy.
I mean, we got McConnell at one point. We got Tim Scott, and we got what was her face? The Nikki Haley.
Yeah.
There was a lot of revisionist history that was going on throughout the course of this. There was a lot of straight out lying that was happening during the course of this.
I feel like Mitch McConnell, somebody made him a deal to get him there. He didn't really want to be there, but somebody was like, listen, you might lose that race. I got some money. You want me to run some ads? I just need to get the RNC.
So I did happen to catch McConnell's bit.
I didn't listen to it. Listen, Corey, I'm very tired already. I have a problem sleeping. I was worried that if I watched McConnell's speech, I'd lose a whole night of work. I'd fall asleep and then not wake up till the morning.
He played it from a far more old school conservative Republican approach than the other.
A very important election for all of us.
Well, so the one line he did have, which I will give like a slight kudos to whoever wrote this one, because I never even thought about it until this moment, where he was just like, I'm the only person in the leadership of the Congress who isn't from New York or California. And, I take that very seriously because that means I represent everyone who's in between those two spots in the country.
Damn.
And I'm just like, God damn you, Mitch McConnell.
That's good.
How did you pay for somebody who made you that line? Like,
yeah.
Yeah. And then you don't even think about it, too. I mean, like, you think Chuck and Nancy, New York, and then you think Kevin McCarthy, and you're just like, oh, damn, it is all California and New York.
But also, he is a multi-millionaire who only goes home to Kentucky when he absolutely has to. So, to be fair, he lives in D.C. He lives in D.C. and goes home to Kentucky. He has an address there.
He has a property in Kentucky that he has to have all his election stuff go.
Yes. Yeah. That right now just has a pile of mail inside the door because he hasn't been home in a while. Oh, no, he probably has been because he's about to lose this election or at risk of losing the election. So,
God willing.
But it was Corey kind of made fun of in the opening there. I believe that was Kimberly Guilfoyle's speech that you were mocking, right? Like, there was a lot of people shouting and stuff during the RNC, so it's hard to tell. Don Jr. looked like he had just done an 8-ball and then rolled out on stage. I think that Eric is starting to actually model himself after Eric from our cartoon president. I feel like every time I see him, he looks more and more and sounds more and more
I think
like
it's
that
just
guy.
because you have it in your head.
Could be.
That you start thinking about it that way.
Well, like Mitch McConnell doesn't sound like that, but that's the guy.
It's
from
just
the
like
cartoon.
John Oliver was doing the Gilbert Gottfried doing Jared Kushner's voice.
Yeah.
And now anytime I see him about to talk, I start thinking about the in my day. That's going to come out. Even though I know Jared Kushner doesn't sound like that.
He's very calm and he just talks like he's a blue blood from... I just like to have poor people in my apartments and keep them in indentured servitude forever.
So I don't want to get too much into like all the bullet points of why the RNC was terrible. There are plenty of supercut videos that will show you the worst of the worst, so you know all about it.
Yeah, and by the way, big thanks to Roberto for ruining my day by sending the scariest supercut of the RNC.
There are a couple things I would like to bring up.
Yeah.
First of all, living in a place where coronavirus is a very real threat. Anytime I see somebody without a mask, I have a like physical shudder within me.
Visceral reaction.
Yes. I could get into an elevator with my mask on and somebody walks in without their mask on and I get very nervous. And I start thinking about the worst case scenario of somebody else that I interact with getting sick and giving it to their grandmother and blah, 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 and they die and everyone is heartbroken because of something that I did. I'm the proxy for which this happened. And and even though it's not my fault.
No, it is your fault. You're absolutely your fault.
I feel bad because I had some part to play in it. And seeing groups of people without masks do not make me feel like coronavirus is over. It makes me feel like this is a lot of people who are about to get sick, and this seems like a lot of grandparents and people who are in like the worst possible demographic to be out and about, especially at like, there was the one at the White House, which was bad, but there's also the one at Fort McHenry where Pence had people like packed in to make it look like there's no big deal. Even though if you're having a speech at Fort McHenry, clearly there's a big deal because this would normally happen at a stadium.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm aware that there's not as much of a crowd for some reason.
Also, Baltimore, you let him come in and get back out? What's wrong with you?
It's got to be the national parks who allowed that to...
No, but 300 murders a year? And you let this guy get in and out of town? I guess that's why it's Fort McHenry, right? Come in on 95, jump off, do your speech, jump back on 95, and you're back out?
Go back to Slim Charles talking to Stringer Bell, and it's just like, you want to take out a politician? Man, we ain't geared up for that.
Yeah, but it's Baltimore now.
Downtown Clay Davis?
Have you seen Hotel Artemis?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I just imagine that Baltimore now, since we've been gone for so long, I'm just imagining it like L.A. in Hotel Artemis. And so watch it, and then just just say what I mean.
Number two, we could argue all day about Hatch Act and what is and what isn't a violation of the Hatch Act. Traditionally, the president and the vice president are immune to Hatch Act violations in this regard.
For political speeches, you mean?
Like, so the idea of him hosting it in front of the White House.
And any other president during a pandemic who wants to hold an election event at the White House, I'm like, he's staying inside. That's fine.
Yeah.
The 1,500 people you brought in, now I got a problem with it. Like, okay.
We can argue finer points of where the Hatch Act begins and ends. To me, the one thing that is completely unacceptable and I am not happy about is that Mike Pompeo took time during a long advertisement for somebody running for office to take the time to endorse and speak up Donald Trump's great accomplishments. Mm-hmm. The Secretary of State does not speak at these events. The Secretary of State is the person who is supposed to be much like, like when we talk about like the director of the FBI or the CIA or something like that. These are people who you work with as president. You have daily communication with, but there needs to be an arm's length relationship between the two of you.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't work for you. He works for the American people. He just reports to you.
He's the chief diplomat for the country. Yes. And the idea being that he could eventually go to another country and be like, listen, this president has this policy. However, it's in our national interest to do something slightly different.
I mean, hypothetically, as part of being Secretary of State, he might have to have a conversation with the president about something that he learns.
Yep.
So, like, if he, went to, I don't know, Russia and found out that they were
They
trying
got a
to
pee-pee tape of you.
they were trying to interfere with our election in some sort of way.
Wait.
A Secretary
Corey,
of State.
they were walking down the line of it's too crazy
I
for
know
a movie.
it's a ridiculous scenario, but
Yeah.
stick with me for a minute.
Okay.
In a world where this sort of awful thing would happen, the Secretary of State would go right up to the president and be like, I've heard through our intermediaries and my conversations with other diplomats around the world that this is happening.
Yeah.
It's a violation of the law. What are you? Is this true? And then they would have to, that might escalate to more problems for the president, because he does the Secretary of State, while part of the cabinet, part of being picked by the president, does not work for them. He works for us.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're showing video of him from Jerusalem talking about how great Trump is a big problem for me.
Yep.
Because that's not what it'd be like if John Roberts came onto the RNC
Yeah.
and gave a speech about how great Trump was.
Yeah, then I'd have a real problem with that.
You don't work for He doesn't work for you.
Also,
you are supposed to be an independent body that does not operate within the political
could you
means.
have picked a worse spot? Yes, Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, which upset 1 billion Muslims. And now you, Secretary of State, who are supposed to be our chief diplomat, are going to go to that place in Jerusalem.
To rub it in, yeah.
And essentially rub it in and be like, we should give him another 4 years because he's doing such a great job.
By the way, regardless of the fact of who is Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo is not the flashy showman that necessarily brings the house down. So I don't know if his contribution was necessarily needed in this moment.
Yeah, by the way, it would be a lot like if we had the chief of our strategic arms, so the guy who runs all the nuclear weapons, go to Taiwan and then talk about how Trump was being tough on China. Not a good look. And that guy actually does work for the president. He doesn't necessarily work for us. It's just not good. But and then the other thing is putting the equation of Pompeo in Jerusalem, Pence at Fort McHenry, the crazy couple who pulled guns on protesters. That they're all equal. And my son's girlfriend, because somehow she gets a damn stage. I don't understand.
It's to me, the most amazing part is that you might not agree with the opposing political party. You might be a Democrat. You don't agree with how Republicans think of things, right?
Yeah.
For a long time, I knew people who were, Republicans, but they had problems within their own party. Like,
you mean rhinos? They're rhinos, Corey.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, the convention was meant to be a place where we put away our differences a little bit and we try and welcome as many people in.
And put the knives away and we come out.
Think about it as like a welcoming party to people who show up to, like, you just come to this college, right? Non-COVID area. So like we're having a big party and all the incoming freshmen are coming to this party.
Do you feel that?
Is there a earthquake going on?
I don't know. It feels weird.
Waiting for it.
I feel like a rumble and my drink is moving.
Oh. It could have been traffic, though.
It might be traffic, but it's like I got one consistent. Are you touching the table?
Yeah. Is that it?
Nope, still moving. I think there's an earthquake happening right now.
Oh.
Hey, guys. Hey, we got one live. Yay.
It reminds me of that time where we had the super loud thunder on the...
Oh, yeah. Wow.
It's like, we've angered God.
Ooh. Maybe God's a Republican.
Maybe he doesn't like us talking about Pompeo.
That makes sense. His son is a brown skin, long hair hippie. Of course, dad's going to be a Republican. That makes sense.
Moving on, our final little bit here of the show. Moving into for your consideration. You want to make your joke about the drop right now?
No, go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah,
I know
it's
it.
fine.
I know it's your favorite part of the show.
We have something solemn to talk about this time,
Yeah.
so I'll keep it serious.
So yes, this past week we lost Chadwick Boseman, and I was thinking about it first of all, I was completely caught off guard by this moment. Did he tell anybody? Have we heard this? Because
no, I don't think anybody knew. His
yeah,
family knew, but that was it.
Yeah, it's amazing because he would have been going through cancer throughout Black Panther, throughout
every
Avengers,
appearance in the
like,
Marvel universe, he was fighting cancer.
Yeah, like unbelievable. Like to think about it in that regard.
Well,
And
I saw an interview with somebody in his family who just said when he found out, and then sometime thereafter, they offered him Black Panther, and he knew how much that would mean to black boys and girls all across the world, and how it could go wrong if the wrong person portrayed it. And he thought, like, I can do this.
yeah,
Like, he was Jackie Robinson. He was rock and roll.
Get On Up.
Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
remember the name of the guy from Get On Up though.
I know. Yeah, I have it like on the tip of my tongue, but I can't.
Anyway, so he handled that kind of like very important role before, portraying a real person and doing it very well. So he basically was just like, no, I have to do it because it has to be handled right so that this is exactly what it became. Like pictures of little black boys and girls all across the country doing the Wakanda salute with their Marvel action figures.
And you know, that's the thing I think that is really like, not only did he in a short time create a incredible career's worth of roles, like if he died at 80 and we were just saying 42, Get On a Black Panther, so like his current filmography, you would be like he had an incredible run.
Yep.
And to do it in a fraction of the time is just applause worthy for him. And every so often this week I was thinking back to things that happened during the promotion of Black Panther. And one that specifically happened where they would get people after the screening and they would say like, you know, like, hey, talk to this camera and say like why you like Black Panther so much. And they would have like, you know, kids like going like, you know, like I've never seen a superhero who looked like me up on the screen. It's so amazing. I can't, you know, this is so unlike anything I've ever seen before. And then, you know, Chadwick's like sneaking in behind and like in the middle of their things, he's like putting his hands on their shoulders and they're just like, oh my God. And it's like love and every, like the way that he could impact people and the incredible class that people speak of just in his day-to-day life and his character and like
going to visit
how he cared
cancer.
to people. Yeah.
Going to visit cancer patients when you are dying from cancer.
Yeah.
And just being like, it ain't about me. I'm here to improve their lives. That's what I'm here for. Like,
he will be missed greatly.
Yeah.
And you know, it's
I'm sad we didn't get Black James Bond because clearly if there's a dude who could be Black James Bond, the guy who's fighting cancer and is like, no, I got to go do this Marvel thing because I got to establish something for people like me all across the world. Okay.
You know, and it's, you know, for a while early on in his career, because I think the first thing I had seen him from was 42.
Yeah.
And I remember I had problems with 42 for a while because Jackie had a very particular voice.
Yeah.
And
I think it's been well documented. I think you've talked about it on the podcast.
I probably have.
The only complaint you had about the movie was that.
Yeah, I liked the movie a lot. The voice threw me.
Yeah.
And I heard him on some podcast not too long ago, you know, like within the last year or something like that, and they talked about 42.
Mm-hmm.
And the voice came up. It's just like, well, did you ever think about doing Jackie's voice and stuff like that? And it's like something we talked about, but we were worried that it's so unique that they would worry about whether or not I can maintain it and like make it seem like I'm like, you know, much like if you were doing an accent, like I had to do a British accent for this role.
You don't want it to fall off.
If you can do it a little bit every once in a while, then it's not good enough to be the thing you do throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
And if it's going to be inconsistent, it's not worth doing throughout the entire movie. And the story of Jackie Robinson is so much more important than the voice that he had.
It also has a bit of that the characters who white guys doing black face. Can't remember what they're called. Starts with an M. Anyway, so back in vaudeville, when white guys would play black guys and they'd do it in blackface, they would do this high pitched voice like, "Hey there, mister." I remember that there was an interview where he was talking about that he was concerned that it would come off more like I keep thinking,
minstrel.
Minstrel. I was thinking mandolin, but it's not mandolin. Minstrel. It would come off more minstrel because people didn't know that's what Jackie Robinson sounded like.
Yeah.
And so it was better just to keep it in his voice, can maintain that all the way through.
Yeah.
Without getting all minstrelly and without having it fall through and not be accurate. So.
Yeah, and it's just a really sad day. It always, I guess he wouldn't have wanted the pity party of people knowing and like bringing it up all the time. Like
I can
maybe
imagine.
he just wanted to have this private and not out there. But it really, in a world where you don't feel like that shot to the gut that much,
Yeah.
like that sort of felt like it in a way, you know? Like
I think also his wife or his daughter, I think, was on CNN, and they were just like, part of his message was, go get screened.
yeah.
He found out later after it had been developing for a while, because one thing that black men don't get screened for is for colon cancer. And by the way, white men don't get screened for it either.
Yeah.
My grandfather died from it. My dad has had it before. So with two generations of my family having essentially had colon cancer, my dad, they caught it before it became a tumor, before it was cancerous.
Yeah.
He just got polyps. The doctors recommend starting at 40. And I'm like, seems a little late. I really shouldn't get into that earlier.
Well, I mean, there's scientific evidence that maybe that should move up substantially because there's a lot more growth in colorectal cancer in people who are in their 20s and 30s than there had been previously.
Funny thing, insurance
So-
doesn't cover it. And
Well,
it's like a $2,000 procedure. And I'm like, you want me to pay $2,000 for a colonoscopy?
There's
I'll wait till 40. Thanks.
there's one where you like shit in a box, isn't there?
so
And like send it in. Sorry, was that too?
No.
Was that too crude for you?
that is a very apt way of putting it. Yes, there is a test where you shit in a box and then send it in the mail, and then you get results back. But the problem is, so my grandfather.
Is that like a pre-screening thing though?
No, it's not. It's if you have cancerous cells, it picks it up.
Gotcha.
But it doesn't pick up the precancerous polyps. And that's the thing. Like my dad never had to worry about it because anytime he had any kind of polyp, they picked it up and they clip it off and it doesn't get a chance to become cancerous. But the pre-screening tests don't pick up precancerous. They only pick up, hey, you got something going on. Let's go in and take a look. So even if you do that, you could do that all the way up until, and they're like, oh, cancer cells. And it's like, oh, yeah, so turns out you had 19 polyps and they all kind of became cancerous at the same time. So we're going to have to take the whole colon now.
Yeah.
Instead of get the polyp early. And that's so one of the things, that, again, back to the shit in the box. The thing that his daughter, whose wife, I can't remember who it was, who was on CNN, was just like, listen, push your doctor to do early screenings. For people who are not, don't have it in their family at all, it's 55. It's 40 for me because I have like pre-existing family.
Yeah.
I'm like 55, but it's a growing issue amongst especially in your late 30s and early 40s. And so people should go get tested. It's he's 43 and he's been fighting it for 4 or 5 years now. So like 39, he was diagnosed. And I'm sure he had good insurance. Well, he had the Actors Guild insurance. So it's that kind of thing like.
Well, I mean, like, you say to yourself, too, like, in your mind, like, a celebrity has the money and resources in which to have doctors who can get on top of this sort of thing if you're aware, and it can slip past even someone on his level or someone of his resources. So
it sucks. By the way, a colonoscopy is the worst. It's like the worst 48 hours you ever have to live through every single year.
Yeah.
Or every other year, depending on. But it's terrible. But do it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to die and it's not good.
And two super quick things on for your consideration before we get out. It was announced this week that there is going to be a West Wing reunion.
Yes.
On,
happier news.
Yes.
So.
On HBO Max at some point before the election, I was told.
And by the way, for the racists out there, it's Dule Hill, not Chadwick Boseman, who is on West Wing. I know I was having people, you would think that, but Dule Hill's the guy from Psych. He's also on the West Wing.
Were you seeing people say like, "Oh, I loved him on the West Wing," talking about Chadwick Boseman people?
But apparently, there were pictures of some local news. Apparently, like it does with every.
Yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't say just black people. It happens with white people too. But just putting up pictures of random black celebrity who's not Chadwick Boseman. Like,
Yeah.
the guy's Black Panther. You don't know who that is. But just putting up the wrong face. But yeah, Dule Hill is from West Wing.
I do wonder sometimes if somewhere in a like file catalog of like, you know, if you need to write a story about like Chadwick Boseman real quick,
Yeah.
and you go into the public domain or like to the
Wikipedia.
no, well, to the list of pictures you have to pull
yeah.
for New York Times to put on.
Sure.
Like maybe just a Dule Hill is mislabeled. And some guy just goes like, "Oh, this is a really good picture," just like doesn't know the person and just like puts it on the article, and it's like,
Well, and the problem, the argument for
sometimes
why
sometimes I feel like this isn't necessarily the problem of the person who posted the thing as it is the
so they keep saying that the problem is somebody writes the story, somebody pulls the pictures,
Yeah.
and then a person who has no idea what either of these things are, but is like, this is the space I need, make it look pretty, doesn't read the story, just here's a picture. All right, I'm going to size it down and wrap the story around and post. And then like, so we just were out of touch because the person who got the picture didn't know that it was mislabeled. Story, person put it together, no final check, just went straight out, and then we used the wrong picture. So
yeah, but I'm super excited for the West Wing, even if it is one singular episode.
I didn't read anything. Are they picking up where they left off, or is it 2020? Because he would have been out of office a long time at this point.
I mean, so I had heard Sorkin talking about the idea of maybe doing like a limited series of the original cast, like with the idea that maybe it would transition into another West Wing story you could tell with new presidents and new staffers and stuff like that. But I would imagine that they're probably getting together for like a one-time event. At the end of the West Wing, no spoiler here, but at the end of the West Wing, there's a moment where the cast reassembles like far in the future after the presidency is over, at the dedication of the Bartlett Library.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was like we're cutting ahead. It was the end of the first scene in the last season where it's just like, oh, the president has arrived and the doors open and then it's just white and then it's like into the theme song.
Yeah.
So like, it was like teasing the presidency, like who won the president. But yeah. I don't know. I'm just excited in general. I'm willing to take whatever they give me because I think that they'll know how to do this in a proper way.
Also, I'm up for more West Wing. If you want to do, we are sometime in, because by the way, the West Wing had the off. It was like 2002 was when Jed Bartlett was elected. Like it didn't make sense. But if you want to go, Jed Bartlett's the elder statesman coming in and meeting the new Democratic president before he goes to office, and we're getting a like, oh yeah, I got this guy. Okay, Leo's dead, right?
Yeah.
So Leo's dead. He can't be there. But like Josh was in my White House, and I heard that he had helped you out with the campaign a little bit, and
Toby,
CJ. And like they all just kind of come in, and it's our introduction to like, oh, these people we love, and then the counterparts. Like, who's your communications person? And it's Kristen, what's her name? Kristen Bell is the new communications person. And you're like, oh, that's fine. And then we got a new West Wing.
Yeah.
It'll make me happy that no matter what happens in November, I'll have a Democrat in the White House on the show.
You know, the problem is that it's the West Wing was never really like the most authentic show.
Yeah.
Like it felt a little bit Democrat fever dream. And I don't know how you would be able to. At the time where The West Wing came out was kind of like the last time in American history where you could make a show like that and it still be believable.
Yeah.
Where like Republicans are just like people we have to get through to get to the eventual end of we negotiate with them in good faith and stuff like that. Like a version of The West Wing in this time and place would not be, it's like the old David Simon line. Like, why don't you write about Baltimore anymore? It's because I don't write comedies.
But I mean, you could turn it more into like a war series. Like instead of having Sorkin write it, get Catherine Bigelow to write the new West Wing, and then it makes more sense, right? Like you're in the war room, and it's like, who are we bombing? Republicans. That's where we're going after. We're going headhunting. I mean, I think that would work. Honestly, I just want. There's no good political shows right now.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy that we're not going to make cop shows anymore or prosecutor shows. Other than
they'll be back. It's only a matter of time before Law and Order goes back for their.
So Law and Order is going to stick around.
Yeah.
SVU and Criminal Intent.
Yeah.
The other one's probably gone.
Yeah.
Let's hope for good. But let's replace that with political shows. And you know what? I take it back. Let's make it The West Wing so that people have a good example of like what it's like. Listen.
Well, the problem is we have to have Sorkin for that.
Yeah.
Because when we don't have Sorkin, it's not quite the same show. I loved it still, but I'm saying it's
Aaron,
not quite the same show.
Listen, I'm asking you. What we need a show where you see the Democrats say, we got to come to a way of agreement. We believe two very different things, but can we compromise? And the compromise isn't us going 99% of the way and the other party going 1. It's an actual compromise.
Yeah.
And maybe if a new generation of people watch that show, they'll be like,
this is what politics can be like?
This is what it's supposed to be like. And then things will change. And Andy Harris will get voted out. Anyway.
I love that last part. Nice little touch. Last little thing.
Yeah.
There's still more to come on this story, but we wanted to sort of tease it a little bit because at some point it's going to break more and we'll have a lot more to talk about in this regard. But Ron Meyer, who has sort of been colloquially known as like the mayor of Hollywood because of how long he's been one of the most important people in town, from being an agent with the Young Turks when Ovitz started his own, started WME and stuff like that. And most recently being the head of NBC Universal, I'm pretty sure of. He just recently resigned, citing a extramarital affair he had with an actress by the name of Charlotte Kirk. And there were some talks that he was having where she was extorting him or trying to extort him in some sort of way. But he's stepping down because he didn't want to deal with all this.
Yeah.
And
he's made enough money, so he's just going to go live in the south of France.
He's
like,
okay
right.
now, yeah. But what's so interesting here is that Charlotte Kirk, the woman at the center of this, also had a relationship with Kevin Tsuchihara, who was the head of Sony.
You don't say.
In a similar, like a year later. So Ron Meyer was first, and then Tsuchihara was second. But he had to step down because of complications from his relationship or his affair with her.
Ah, weird.
So people have reached out to Charlotte Kirk trying to get her side of the story, to which she has responded to many media inquiries. Do you pay for interviews? To which, like Variety and Deadline are like, no.
To which real media outlets say, no, we don't pay for the story. But
I'm sure at some point Celeb 411 or something like that will have the exclusive
Playboy.
Yeah, somebody who wants to pay for it.
Yeah.
And we'll get more information there, but it's a very interesting story because it seems like there's a little bit of like, like I'm dating these people to raise my profile for better roles and stuff like that. And it doesn't, there's claims of extortion out there, which is yet to be,
we'll see.
Yet to be proved in any kind of way. But that's a pretty outlandish claim to put out there if there isn't some smoke to that fire.
Yeah, you would think that there's going to be something.
So something to keep an eye on, because this is just going to... I'll tell you for a fact, in a town like Hollywood, this is going to eventually become a movie one day, because there's no way that one woman takes down these two people without it becoming a story like that. And the problem is there's so much that people don't know that you don't want to draw to conclusions or make assumptions about anyone involved in this sort of thing. But there is sort of like this Bowfinger part of this where it seems like she's the type of person who like kind of dates more important people as she goes along, and
up the call sheet, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is a long time thing that has happened in Hollywood and other industries forever. But I don't know. It's just been a long time since we've had a story like this, and it's one of the. It's funny because like I used to talk about things that I would hear in Hollywood. Like there would be rumors of Harvey and stuff like that. And even in Maryland, I knew about it. But there is kind of a difference to like being in town and hearing about things that are just sort of brewing. So there's so little to report on, but it's like a big story is coming, It's so hard to like you want to talk about it, but you don't know. You don't want to be irresponsible. You know.
I wonder how much it's getting play anywhere else. Because now that we live here, I wonder if it's like, oh, I'm like inside the bubble where it pops up on my Twitter and I see the stories because it's like, oh, you're in Hollywood and also this is happening. And would we even know about it if we were anywhere else?
It's very interesting though.
Yeah.
And it's something to keep an eye on. Well, we will report more, but we wanted to sort of like put it out there.
Yeah.
Speaking about putting it out there, OTheAnthem.com, Corey at OTheAnthem.com, O The Anthem on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the listener line, 443-219-7595.
What's that number again?
443-219-7595. You can find more of me at my website, CoreyBakerFilmmaker.com, Facebook.com/CoreyBakerFilm, and at LegendsCB5 on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I have uploaded the new review for Bill and Ted's Face the Music.
Ooh.
It is just needing the finishing touches before it's live, but it's on the YouTubes at the moment, so I think you could actually see it if you just go to the page. If you want to just like sneak a peek real quick before I get the album art and stuff like that, it's all up there for viewing pleasure. We'll be in podcatchers by the end of the day, so there's that.
The end of the day as you're listening to this, not as you're recording it. Yes, of course.
Well, clearly, if you're listening to this on the day that this podcast was released, and why wouldn't you? You will also have a new version of the Corey Baker Filmmaker Movie Reviews podcast as well.
Yes. And, of course, you can find me at all your social networks at Robert and Cheek. There it is. I'm going to learn which side it is before we get done with this thing. Where was I? At Robert and Cheek on our social networks. You can check out my website, robertandcheek.com, where you can find links to everything that I'm doing, including the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/RobCheek. You can find links to the campaign for president. Sorry, at Rob Cheek for Prez. And that's all words, unlike Corey's searching mentality. It's Rob Cheek, FORPRES. Rob Cheek for Prez. Let's see, the Everyman Movie Review at Everyman Movie on all social media. And, of course, you can find those on the YouTube channel. And because I don't have enough going on with doing my 2-a-week Everyman Movie Reviews, and I mean, Corey, you understand that with your posting 2 times a week movie reviews as well. That's...
yeah, exactly what I'm doing.
Yes. But, yeah, so Everyman Movie Review twice a week, podcast form on Anchor and in YouTube. But now, starting tomorrow, or starting today as you're listening to this, brand new podcast... Rob Explains. It's a daily podcast discussing and explaining interesting, random, and cool things. We're starting out episode 1 with galaxies colliding, and episode 2 is going to be the Fujiwara effect. Both things we talked about on an episode a few weeks ago. A couple of bonus...
last week, as a matter of fact.
Was it last week?
Yeah.
Time has no meaning.
Time soup.
But yeah, so we'll also on release day, which is today, Tuesday, you're going to find the introduction episode, episode 1, and 3 bonus episodes where I talk about trees, sharks, and dogs, because that's the key to YouTube. And I know that. So trees, sharks, and dogs, make sure you check out the new episodes, and they'll be up daily. Subscribe to the podcast, and it'll give you 5 to 10 minutes of a podcast, which I am starting to think is the perfect length. So check that out. It's at Rob Explains on all social media and Rob Explains on Anchor.
Splendiferous.
Yes.
Well, I think we've done good here today.
We've done something. I don't know if it's good. By the way, I'm exhausted explaining the things that I do, let alone doing the things that I do. I'm going to inspire you two to work eventually at some point here. I don't know when, but
I was busy all day from the moment that I woke up later than everybody else. So I don't want to hear it.
And especially with that comment, always, we've done something. I don't know if it's good. But as always, this is the O The Anthem podcast, part of the O The Anthem digital network. For Corey, this is Rob. Have a great week, everybody.
Please don't listen to the man behind the curtain.